Hey all, this is Anjali, and today we're going to discuss some important questions for your final board exams VIVA. As we know now, the exams are approaching, and most of you have your final practicals in the month of Feb, in the first week of Feb, most probably. So you have to be very prepared about the VIVA that they take in the practical exam. As we know that the practical exam has a weightage of 30 marks, so out of these 30 marks, it's divided as per CBSE in different forms like this much marks for your practical file, then for your project file, then for your Viva, and then the program execution over there in the lab. But actually, the thing that matters the most is the Viva. So the external examiner evaluates you on the basis of how you answer in the Viva. So make sure you prepare well for the Viva and perform well in front of the external examiner. So now we'll discuss the questions based on different categories. Like first of all, they can ask you questions about Java. In Java, again, we have basics of Java. Which type of questions now can be asked from the basics of Java? I'm just giving you basic samples. You have to prepare a few more questions along with these. But a basic set of questions would be like, what is the difference between radio button and a checkbox? Now, this is one set of controls. The difference can be asked between anything. It can be asked between a label and a text field, between a list box and a combo box, anything like that. So now when this question is asked, what should be your answer? You have to tell what is the difference between radio button and checkbox. So I would say like radio button is a set of controls where I have multiple options and I can choose only one out of that. Whereas in case of checkboxes, we have multiple options and multiple options can be selected out of that. We can give an example for this. You can tell like for gender, I will be using radio buttons because user should select male or female, any of the two. And for hobbies, I can use checkbox, which appears in the square shape. When we click on it, the tick mark appears, and when you click on it again, the tick mark is removed. So checkbox can be used for hobbies because a person can have multiple hobbies. So that would be the difference between the radio button and a checkbox. A similar question could be differentiate combo box and list box. Now, combo box is a control which shows multiple options, but on the click of the arrow along with it. So we have a black drop down arrow. When we click on that, the list of options open up, but at one point of time, it shows only one option. Whereas in case of list box, it takes more space, it takes a bigger space and multiple options are there within that box and user can select the options out of that. Another difference is in combo box only one element can be selected, whereas in list box multiple elements can be selected, right? Then is what are variables? When you have to define a variable, if the examiner asks you what is a variable, so how would you answer? You'll say like variable is some location in the memory where I can store a value. So where we store a value is a variable. It is said variable since its value can vary. That means it can change during the execution of the program. Now, questions can be asked from your answers itself. Like you have answered for the variable. Now, examiner can ask you in return, like write or tell me an example of declaring an integer variable. So you can simply say like int a. So if I say int a, that's my integer variable a, right? So be prepared when you answer. The questions can be asked from your answer as well, okay? Then comes like what is double data type. So data type means the type of value which we store in a variable, and double means something in points. When I write 7.5, 13.28, so those are double type of values. Another question could be like which method is used to convert a string to integer. So that is a very much used function, that's integer dot parseInt. So when we write integer dot parseInt, in the brackets we give a string and it converts it into an integer value. So that is the answer for these questions. So these kind of questions and similar ones can be asked from the very basics of Java. Then comes specifically from the GUI controls, the palette which we have in our NetBeans. So there are different controls like labels, text fields, button, checkbox, radio button, combo box, list box. So questions can be asked based on that. Like you can be asked, what is the difference between is selected and set selected? So the is selected function is used with radio buttons and checkboxes both to see whether they are selected or not. So is selected tells me if the radio button or checkbox is selected or not. It gives true or false. Whereas set selected is used to select or deselect a radio button or a checkbox. So I can select a radio button or checkbox with the help of this function, or I can remove the selection with the help of this function. Then which statement is used to get the selected element out of a list box? If you have to see which element is selected in the list box, the function is listbox name dot get selected index. Now get selected index will give the position of the selected element, but if we want the value, then it is get selected item. You answer both of these or any one of these, it should be correct. So get selected index and get selected item. Okay. Now next is, what is the use of set text? Now you very well know what is the use of set text. It is used to show something into the text field or a text area, or on the text of any of the button, radio button, or anything. So basically we use it with text fields to show the text inside the text field. That's set text. If they ask you what is get text, so that is used to read the value of a text field. Then how can you make a text field uneditable? Uneditable means you cannot type in the text field. If you want to do that, you have to write text field name dot set editable in bracket false. So text field name dot set editable in round brackets false will make it uneditable, means user will not be able to type in that text field. Okay. So these were the questions related with the palette. Then comes your condition control statements, where we have our if and switch. So questions related to if and switch could be like this. What is the difference between if and switch? A very commonly asked question. So the difference between if and switch majorly is that if can check any sort of condition. It can check greater than, less than, greater than equal to, less than equal to, anything. But switch can check only equality. Switch cannot check anything other than equal to. So that is the major difference between if and switch. Okay. Another differences could be multiple variables can be used with if, but switch can use only one variable in its round bracket. Then any data type can be used in if for checking conditions, whereas in case of switch we use only int or character. Then is, what is the use of default case? Now default case is there in switch, and this is used to give the statements to be executed when none of the case matches with the switch variable. So if none of the case matches with the switch variable, the statements given in the default case will be executed. What is fall through? If you miss the break statement in the matching case, that becomes a fall through, because when the break statement is missing in the matching case, switch will execute the statements of the following cases as well till a break statement is found or switch gets over. Such a situation is called fall through. Then it's a similar question, means the question is different but the meaning is almost same. That is, what is the use of break statement? So break statement is used to terminate the switch once the statements of the case are executed. That's why we give break as the last statement of every case, so that once the statements of the case are executed, it comes out of the switch. Now the next thing is, they can ask you questions about loops, that is the repetition statements for, while and do while. The very basic question asked for loops is, what is the difference between entry control loop and exit control loop? So entry control loop and exit control loop you've done so many times since you are studying in 12th as well as you did it in 11th. So entry control loop, as the name says, is the one where condition is checked when we enter the loop, and exit control loop is the one where condition is checked when we are exiting from the loop. Examples of entry is for and while, an example of exit control is do while. And the major difference is that if the condition is false for the first time, for and while, that is entry control loops, will not work at all. Whereas your exit control loop, that is do while loop, will work at least once even if the condition is false for the first time. Then how many times an entry control loop will work if condition is false for the first time? None. It will not work. We just discussed it. Then name a loop which is exit control loop, do while. Then what is the use of break statement in a loop? As we have break statement to terminate the switch, Similarly, we can use break statement inside a loop, any of the three loops, to stop the loop in between. Then there is a theoretical chapter that's classes and objects. Usually it's not asked much, but they can ask you questions from this as well. And those questions could be like, what's an object? So object is anything which has certain features and operations to be performed on it. For example, a text field. Features could be the text written in the text field, its font and all, and the operations can be set text, get text and all. Then what is function or a method? So a function or a method is a group of statements used to perform a task. That's called a function or a method. What is encapsulation? It is the procedure of making a class. To define it properly, you can say wrapping up of data and functions to work upon that data in a single unit called class. That's called encapsulation. Polymorphism. Now, polymorphism is when a single thing can be used in many forms. That is called polymorphism. For example, you can tell, like, if we use plus sign with numbers, if I write 5 plus 3, it will give me 8. But if I use the same plus sign with strings, it will join the strings, that is concatenate the strings. For example, if I have hello in double quotes plus world in double quotes, that gives me hello world. Then we have what is inheritance. This is another feature of classes, that is you can use one class to create another class, that is inheritance. For example, rectangle can be used to make cuboid by adding height to rectangle, since rectangle already has length and breadth. Now a related question can be asked, like, which keyword is used for inheritance? So the keyword used for inheritance is extends, extends, extends. And we have a type of inheritance called multiple inheritance, which is not supported in Java. So they can ask you which type of inheritance is not supported in Java, and the answer would be multiple inheritance. Okay, so this is how questions from classes and objects can be asked in Viva. And then comes the main thing, JDBC, Java Database Connectivity. Your project is dependent on JDBC only. So it's very important. Either they can directly ask you about JDBC, or when they are checking your project file, they can ask you about JDBC out of that. What you should know about JDBC is which classes are used to make a connection with a database. That is the class named connection, and the second class is driver manager. So we have two classes required to make a connection. Name of the class is connection and driver manager. Then how can you set the provider? For that we use the line class.forName, and in brackets we have to write the driver name. Then what is the difference between execute update and execute query? Now execute update command is used to execute an SQL query which will make changes in the database like delete, update or insert. But if you have your select command, which is going to work on the table and going to fetch the data and bring it back to Java, that will be executed with the help of execute query. So in short, execute update is used to execute update, delete or insert, and execute query is used to execute select command. Fine. Then we have name any two methods of result set class. So two methods of result set class is rs.next, rs.previous. You have rs.first and last also, and the meaning of the functions is clear by the name. rs.next will move it to the next record. rs.previous will move it to the previous record. Similarly, we have first and last. Why do we use import java.sql.star? If you check out any JDBC code, we have this line on the top. This helps us to use all these classes which we use for JDBC, that is connection, driver manager, statement, result set. So all these classes are there in the package named SQL. So to use those classes, we need to import this file so that I can use classes related to JDBC in my program. I hope it's clear with you how to use the basic concepts of Java and how to prepare for these concepts for your Viva. In case you need any other suggestions, any other doubts you have in your mind, do write in the comment section below. I'll get back to you. And Be confident when you're answering your answers in your Viva exam, because your Viva is the main impression which you leave on the external examiner. Hope you could take benefit out of it. If you found it useful, do like the video, share with your classmates, and if you haven't subscribed the channel, subscribe it yet so that you get the updates of the next videos, where I'm going to tell you the Viva questions about SQL, Viva questions for your project file, and Viva questions for your computer networks and open source software. Thank you.